Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a question that is, well, deceptively simple on the surface, but profoundly complex when you really dig into it. Is lying ever okay? We're going to take a deep, philosophical, and scientific dive into the true morality of deceit. It's a question that has literally puzzled theologians, philosophers, and psychologists for centuries. And honestly, the answers we find today might just completely change how you think about your daily conversations.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining the act of lying, move into the absolutist strict prohibition, explore utilitarianism and those messy gray areas, shift over to the ethics of care, and finally, wrap up with the actual science of prosocial lying.
Let me just ask you point blank, have you ever praised a genuinely terrible drawing? Or, I don't know, maybe you've acted absolutely thrilled to get a pair of scratchy tube socks from Aunt Judy. Or somehow managed to choke down Uncle Bob's famously terrible stew with a giant smile on your face. Look, we've all told these daily white lies. But what do these little deceptions actually mean for our moral standing? Are we doing something fundamentally wrong? Or are we just doing something deeply human?
That brings us to Section 1, defining the act of lying. I mean, what exactly is a lie?
If we look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, their traditional L1 definition of lying is actually incredibly strict. Before we can even judge the morality of lying, we have to establish that it requires a few very specific components. First off, you need an untruthful statement, meaning you personally believe it to be false. Second, there has to be a specific addressee, a person you believe can actually understand you. You can't exactly lie to a dog or a robot. And third, there has to be a clear intent to deceive that person into believing your statement is true. So it isn't just getting a fact wrong by accident, it's a deliberate, calculated act of manipulation.
Moving on to Section 2, the absolutist strict prohibition. Basically, the argument for why lying is always categorically wrong. We're going to start this part with Buddhism and the concept of right speech, or samavaka. This involves 4 very specific abstentions: abstaining from false speech, slanderous speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. The Buddha argued that human society simply cannot survive on falsities. A society built on lies is eventually going to collapse into chaos. Because of that, intentional truthfulness is absolutely essential. It promotes vital harmony both within yourself and within the larger group.
This idea really illustrates the core of the Buddhist perspective. The thought here is that indulging in false or slanderous speech doesn't just mess up the society around you. It totally disrupts your own individual peace and equanimity. It highlights that telling lies is not a healthy sign for anyone in a community, mostly because one lie inevitably leads to another, right? Until you're just trapped in this self-constructed web of deceit.
Now, if we shift from Eastern thought over to Western theology, let's consider Thomas Aquinas' strict theological view. Aquinas firmly held that all lies are evil and they are all sins. His reasoning was that words are naturally signs of what's in our minds, so saying something else is fundamentally unnatural. But he did logically categorize them into a sort of hierarchy. An officious lie told for a useful purpose, or a jocose lie told just in fun, well, those are considered pardonable or diminished sins. But a mischievous lie intended to maliciously hurt someone, that is a mortal sin. Yet the baseline for Aquinas remains exactly the same. Every single lie is a sin.
This incredibly strict view only gained steam during the Enlightenment era with the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant introduced this rigid framework known as the categorical imperative. He basically argued that you must only act according to a rule that you'd want to become a universal law for absolutely everyone. Kant's logic is that if everyone lied, say borrowing money with literally no intention of paying it back, then trust and language would completely collapse overnight. No one would ever lend money, and no one would believe a word anyone said. Therefore, for Kant, lying is just a logical contradiction.
So, just how extreme is Kant's absolutism? Well, he anchored his whole stance with this famous murderer at the door thought experiment. Imagine a murderer literally knocks on your front door and asks if your best friend is hiding inside. I think most of us would lie in a heartbeat to save our friend, right? But Kant controversially argues that even this doesn't justify a lie. He claimed moral actions do not get their worth from expected consequences. Lying to the murderer would be treating them as a mere means to an end, denying their rationality. For Kant, you simply cannot lie, period, regardless of the context.
Which brings us to Section 3, Utilitarianism and Gray Areas. What happens when context and consequences actually matter?
Let's put 2 major schools of thought head-to-head here. On one side, we've got Kant's duty-bound reason, totally focused on absolute rules no matter what happens.
On the flip side, we have John Stuart Mill and utilitarianism. Utilitarianism focuses entirely on outcomes, passions, and the greater good. From this viewpoint, the rightness of lying is judged by the goodness or badness of its consequences. If a lie results in saving a life and preventing immense pain, well, a strict utilitarian framework is going to look at that context and evaluate the outcome quite differently than Kant would.
Then you throw in this fascinating idea from philosopher Hugo Grotius, who pointed out that the right to truth can actually sometimes be forfeited. Grotius argued that if someone gives tacit consent to be deceived, like for instance a sick friend who is deeply comforted by hopeful falsehoods, no actual wrong is being done to them. And the same logic applies to thieves or people with malicious intent. They might have just forfeited their right to demand the truth from you altogether.
Philosopher Sissela Bach brings a wonderfully nuanced perspective that kind of tries to bridge this massive gap. She completely acknowledges the widespread moral prohibitions against deceit, and she absolutely agrees that lies severely erode public confidence. But she also finds strict utilitarianism totally inadequate for dealing with highly complex, real-world realities. Ultimately, she argues that extreme circumstances, like wartime or saving a victim, absolutely warrant exceptions. However, she still strongly advocates for a renewed commitment to truth so we can foster actual societal integrity.
Now for Section 4, the ethics of care, placing empathy over abstract rules. The ethics of care completely shifts the focus. It stops asking what all persons must universally do in a vacuum. Instead, it advocates for attention to particulars, a real appreciation of context and narrative understanding. This framework argues that empathy, sensitivity, and responsiveness to the specific, particular person standing right in front of you are often much better guides than cold, abstract, rigid rules. It asks us to really consider how our choices, including the choice to lie or tell the truth, impact the trust and mutual responsiveness within our actual human relationships.
And finally, Section 5, the science of prosocial lying, how a lie can actually be an act of deep compassion. Researchers at the Greater Good Science Center have this term, prosocial lies. These are defined as falsehoods told purely for someone else's benefit, motivated by strong feelings of empathy and compassion. We are right back to politely eating Uncle Bob's terrible stew. You aren't lying to gain some selfish advantage. You are lying specifically to protect someone else from emotional harm.
What's really fascinating here is how we learn to do this as we grow up. A child's ability to lie is actually an incredible developmental milestone. Around age 3, antisocial lying begins because kids develop a simple theory of mind. They suddenly realize they know things that the adults around them don't. By age 5, they reliably lie to get out of punishment or chores. But check this out. Between ages 7 and 11, their moral reasoning evolves, and children begin telling prosocial lies specifically to protect other people's feelings.
Pulling off a prosocial lie actually requires some seriously heavy cognitive lifting. You don't just need theory of mind, you need empathy to actually identify someone's suffering, compassion to want to fix it, the working memory to keep your fake story completely straight, and the inhibitory control to stop yourself from just blurting out the brutal truth. It requires a highly advanced ability to foresee the emotional consequences of your honesty.
To see this kind of cognitive empathy in the real world, check out a study by Harvard psychologist Felix Warneken. Adults showed children these genuinely terrible drawings. And if the adult acted sad about being a bad artist, the older children consistently chose to tell a white lie to protect the stranger's feelings. They just naturally learned to prioritize kindness over honesty when trying to resolve conflicting social norms. The lie wasn't a moral failure at all. It was a highly sophisticated act of care.
So we've really traveled all over the map today, from strict categorical imperatives that forbid all deceit to the psychological realization that lying can actually be a developmental marker of deep empathy. Which leaves me with one final provocative thought for you to chew on. The next time you find yourself bending the truth, just take a brief moment and ask yourself, was your last lie built on malice or was it built on compassion? Because the true moral motivation behind your words might just be a whole lot more complex than you think.